Well, let's take a look at the gospel for the final week of the Catholic liturgical year, the Solemnity, the Feast of Christ the King, on November 22nd. And the gospel reading is, again, Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, verse 31 to 46. And we notice that the gospel readings become lengthier as we get near the end of the liturgical year, and they become more apocalyptic, more about judgment and end times. And this gospel certainly does that. It's a familiar reading, one that talks about separating the sheep from the goats. And we have here a king, and so much of the gospel we hear about a Messiah who is counterintuitive, not what we were expecting. The world was expecting a king on a throne, and instead we got a baby in a manger. But we understand Jesus to be nonetheless representative of the power, the authority of God the Father, and that Jesus will reign over all and be part of the final judgment of each of us for all of time. And so Jesus tells us this story about a king who separates those before him into two groups, the sheep on the right and the goats on the left. And we know how this is going to go, right? Because we've heard this before. And he says, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and thirsty, a stranger, naked, ill, and in prison. And you attended to me, you cared for me, you were there for me when I needed you." And the righteous say to him, "Well, when did we meet you in any of those conditions?" And the king says in reply, "Amen, I say to you, whatever you did for one of the least brothers of mine, you did for me." And then he turns to those on the left. And it's the same sequence of, but you are accursed, you will be judged harshly because you did not care for me in my need, hunger and thirst and illness and loneliness and imprisoned. And they say, "Well, when did we fail to be there for you, Lord?" Because surely they would have cared for, taken good care of the king. And the king has that same twist. "Well, it was me in the least among you, and you failed to be there for them. So you failed to be there for me." And that really is the message of this final gospel of the year before we head into the new year and the Advent season, that we will be judged on how we care for the least, those on the margins, those who are forgotten, those who are in greatest need. And it's not just physical need, it's emotional need. Those who are forgotten by society, those who are left for dead on the roadside, figuratively as well as literally. Jesus says, those are the ones who I will judge you by. How did you care for them? It was me in them. And so the questions that I offer us, I offer myself, this is an indicting gospel for me, because I am not always there for those in need. I do not spend enough time reaching out to care for those on the margins. I simply don't. And so I listen to this gospel with some fear and trepidation about how God views me, and that I need to do better in not being selfish and taking care of myself and just my family, and playing up to those who are important and powerful. But indeed, how do I care for those who can't repay me, whose opinion doesn't matter to society? That's how I'll be judged. So who are the least in your world, and how do you attend to them? this all starts at home. This all starts locally in the circles of people we know in our local community. But then even beyond that, who are the least, the stranger, the ill, the imprisoned, the naked and forgotten in the world beyond your world? And how do we reach out and understand that we are responsible for those in different parts of the world, those who are very different from us, who don't live in our town, our county, our state, or even in our country, because they too are part of those whom we will be judged by how well we served and loved and cared for others. Certainly there are ways in which God will judge us well. And more than likely, if you're like me, there's work to be done in how well we care for the least among us and the least in our world. Something to ponder and prayerfully lift up to God as we conclude our year, our liturgical year as Catholic people.